Hi there, welcome back to Apatros Review. This episode, Adam and Evil, directed by Andrew Van Sleen, 2004. Hi there, welcome back to Apatros Review, your guide to the wild world of science fiction action horror cinema with me, your host, Mila Sipka. If you want to spell my name, just look at the channel name. Now in this episode we look at the film Adam and Evil, which was one of those ultra-cheap direct-to-videos, the horror films that came out at the turn of the century. Pretty much at a time when independent filmmakers were just discovered that you could use digital video. Of course, some of these films are so bad that they created the phrase shot on shitio. Now, this particular film came out in the US on the 27th of April 2004. In Australia, it was originally released on Australian DVD shelves for a rental DVD by Peacock Films, which, if you look at the index picture on this video, is on the right hand side of the screen. It's the one with the chicks on it. While the left has artwork that's almost identical to the one that Flashback Entertainment used for their budget release. Now, one of a staggering number of shot-and-video ultra-cheap horror flicks, mainly slashers, that flooded the horror genre at the turn of the century, Adam and Evil is a somewhat halfway watchable yet ultimately mediocre slasher flick about your stereotypical group of high school students who head to a remote camping location in the backwoods to hold a graduation party. They're graduating from high school. But for one of them, this proves the perfect opportunity to get revenge for their past treatment and life in a mental asylum. This part of the story is not that well developed, aside from having the killer act badass at first, and then once the climactic reveal happens, become a crazy-ass psycho who acts just like a stereotypical psycho would, right before the protagonist's savior winds up being that creepy-looking guy who originally looked like the perfect fit to be the psycho. Anywho, Adam and Evil, the title pretty much gives the killer's identity away if you go for the names in the cast list. Not very clever, guys. It's pretty much a disappointment as far as this just this side of the century post-millennial horror films go, but in a genre known for some of the worst films ever made, particularly the slasher genre, this one is at least a head above many of the competition. The acting is surprisingly decent. These actors do convince to be convincing their roles as horny, sex-obsessed teenagers, even though they look at least a half-decade older than their respective characters are. They all look like they're probably in their mid-20s. And the film's attempts at casting a shadow of suspicion on several of the cast work surprisingly well. You'll never be able to guess the killer on your first watch of the film, unless you notice the coincidence between the title and the cast list. But I'm not gonna give away the killer's identity here. I'll let that be a surprise for you. So, all things considered, this is strictly forgettable stuff, but on the upper level of the D spectrum of grading ladder, so it gets a D+, 3 out of 10. It's disappointing, pretty much mediocre, but it's not terrible. I mean, if you're into cheap slasher films, this is pretty decent by those standards. Now for gore and nudity. Very little gore, surprisingly enough, although some of the deaths look pretty damn gnarly. One guy and his girlfriend get an arrow for their neck. Also, there's quite a few Roman candles featured in this film as a plot device. And as for nudity, well, the token jackass Kevin Robson, playing Seth, finally pops his cherry with the sheriff's wife, Maureen, played by Alison Warnica, who's fully naked during the sex scene, although the only goodies you see are her breasts. Now, I should point out about those DVDs. Like I said, in Australia, it was originally released for Peacock Films, which is the image on the right-hand side of the index picture. And the only thing that has like preview trailers for it. And the Flashback Entertainment disc that came afterwards is no extras, but the quality is pretty much comparable. It looks decent for what it is. It was shown on digital video, and well, I mean, some of these slasher films that they made during that time were the digital video quality was really bad. I've seen horror films from that period that looked really awful, like Trespassers. Remember that one? And Oli Lamel's films looked absolutely horrendous, but this one looks pretty decent. So it looks almost like a professional film. Okay, that's it for Adam and Evil. Gets a D+, 3 out of 10. It's disappointing. Not terrible, but just not worth it, unless you're a fan of slasher films. Then again, it's pretty decent for that one. Okay, that's it for that one. Now, I don't do requests, but if you want to have a particular film in my collection, just hit me up in the comment section, I'll answer. Also, if you have any certain types of horror film that you want me to check out, or science fiction action, then hit me up in the comment section as well. I do not do possession films, by the way. I just hate that genre. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed that. Take it easy and save this review. See ya.